Hello everyone, I'm Zixin Huang. For short, you can call me by my English name Betty. Today I will present strategic policy type and their impact on curriculum and management, a comparative study of China and the US. The report will be reported by me and my partner Zhongqiu Wu, and this report will include 6 parts. First one is overview of type of strategic policy. And second is comparison of strategic policy between China and the US. And third part is impact of strategic policy on curriculum. And fourth part is impact of strategic policy on management. And the last one is conclusion. So let's move to the first part. Overview of types of strategic policy. So, for the first, let me introduce the strategic policy. Education strategy refers to the long-term planning and action plan in the field of education in order to achieve specific education goals and visions. It involves the allocation of educational resources, the formulation of educational policy, the promotion of education reforms, and the enhancement of educational quality. Its formulation and implementation is a complex process that requires the cooperation and coordination of many parties, including the government, educational agency, teachers, students, parents, and all sectors of the community. So let me introduce the categories of strategic policy. The first one is educational development policy. Investment in educational infrastructure, expense of educational access, workforce development for educator, and the improvement of agency quality. And the second one is curriculum reform policy, emphasizing adapting curriculum content to character needs, introducing a new subject, for example, like STEM or digital literacy. And third part is policy for promoting education equity and quality, aims to close gaps between urban and rural education, improve funding and resource allocation. So let's move to the next part. Comparison of strategic policy between China and the US. Let me introduce the US first. So education policy formulation and implementation in the US. Education policy is shaped through a collaborative dynamic between federal and the state governments. The federal government sets broad goals and provide funding, while states retain significant control over implementation. This decentralization allows states to tailor policy to local needs but can lead to variability in educational standards and resource across states. So let's look at the Americans Classical Education Act. NCLB, No Child Left Behind. The law gave schools a dozen years to get 100% of their students to proficiency in reading and math. States had to develop plans showing how they were going to make that happen. Of course, they first had to define what proficiency meant and they adopt regular testing in reading, math, and science to see how students were doing, with results reported by race, gender, language proficiency, and more. School system will give federal prescription on how to intervene in schools where too many students were not proficient. So the NCLB targeted improvement in math performance of students in the lower grades, especially those from poor families. And the NCLB lead to an increase in teachers' compensation and the proportion of teachers with postgraduate degree. And NCLB shifted the allocation of infrastructure time to math and reading, the subject targeted by the new accountability system. So let's move to the next act, the Every Student Succeed Act. So in the federal K-12 education law of the United States, ESSA was signed into law in 2018 and replaced the parallel education law called NCLB. ESSA extended more flexibility to states in education and laid out expectation of transparency for parents and for community. ESSA requires every state to measure performance in reading, math, and science. Each state determined the way students are assessed. Every school in each state must inform parents about their standard and their results. So next, I will share a video that will give you a clear understanding of the ESSA Act and how it differs from the NCLB Act.
You've probably heard of No Child Left Behind, the federal education law that's been on the books since 2002. The era of No Child Left Behind, a law a lot of people really hated, is over, and the Every Student Succeeds Act has replaced it. There are a lot of questions now about how ESSA, as it's called, will work.
So how is ESSA different from the No Child Left Behind Act?
So No Child Left Behind put a lot of power in the hands of the federal government. They were kind of the big dog on the block. And ESSA seeks to really roll that back. Giving states and school districts the chance to call the shots on things like testing, teacher quality, and fixing failing schools.
No Child Left Behind is working.
This bill makes long overdue fixes to the last education law.
Do kids still have to take tests every year?
So let me think about that. Yes, kids still have to take yearly tests in reading and math in grades 3 through 8, plus one time in high school. And schools still have to report test scores.
How does ESSA rate schools differently?
Good question. So even though kids still have to take those yearly tests, ESSA wants states to look at a broader range of factors. States have to pick at least one other indicator that gets at whether kids have the opportunity to learn. That could be access to advanced coursework, maybe school climate. Plus, ESSA gives states a lot more flexibility when it comes to the tests themselves. Districts could decide to have high school kids use the SAT or the ACT instead of the state exam. Plus, under ESSA, a handful of states can experiment with new forms of testing, allowing students to work together on performance tasks instead of those fill-in-the-bubble tests that we're all used to.
What kinds of requirements does ESSA have for teachers?
So under No Child Left Behind, teachers had to be highly qualified. That meant that they had to have a bachelor's degree in the subject they were teaching plus state certification. A few years ago, the Education Department gave states some wiggle room on that requirement, as long as they promised to evaluate teachers in part based on student test scores. As it ended up, though, a lot of teachers found that frustrating. It was really hard to get those evaluations right. Under the new law now, states are in the driver's seat when it comes to teachers. They can decide if they want to stick with highly qualified or those evaluations based on test scores, but they don't have to do either.
And what does ESSA say about the Common Core?
So ESSA says states must set standards that get students ready for college without the need to take remedial courses. But the federal government can't tell states what their standards should be or encourage them to adopt a certain set of standards, including the Common Core.
What does ESSA say about low-performing schools?
States will still have to identify and fix the bottom 5% of schools and those with really high dropout rates.
Hold on a moment. Has ESSA already hit schools?
Not quite yet. It won't be fully in place until the 2017-18 school year. Many of the decisions about how to judge student performance, improve schools, and hold teachers accountable are going to have to be made by states and districts. If they choose to stick with what they're doing now, things aren't going to change very much. If they go off in a very different direction, though, we could see big changes.
Okay, next part will be my partner Virginia Wu to analyze the China's education policy.
Well, in China, China's education system is strongly centralized with the Ministry of Education leading policy, formulation, and implementation. National policies set broad and unified goals to address issues like exam pressure, equitable access to education, and modernization of curriculum, ensuring consistency across regions. And, for example, double reduction policy. The policy's goal is to improve compulsory education, reduce the financial strains on families, and elevate the academic burden on students. The policy was launched in July 2021 and includes measures such as limiting the amount of homework students can receive and standardizing of compact schools. For example, first and second graders in elementary school are not given homework, and the third through sixth graders can only receive homework that can be completely within 16 minutes. So the above information that is clearly shows that the logic of policy development under different political, economic, and cultural contexts. The U.S. has a decentralized system where education policies are influenced by diverse stakeholders, including state governments, local communities, and private entities. Economic considerations such as preparing students for competitive job market and cultural values emphasizing individual achievement and local autonomy shape policy development. The emphasis on accountability and flexibility reflects the broader cultural value of individual responsibility, while China's education policy is influenced by its centralized government model, where the government plays a key role in planning and guiding social and economic development. Education is seen as a means of social coherence, national development, and cultural continuity. Policies are shaped to meet strategic goals like reducing inequalities and fostering a skilled workforce aligned with national priorities. Cultural values that emphasize collective responsibility, respect for authority, and national unity underlie the educational policy framework.
Okay, so let's move the third part is impact of strategic policy on curriculum. Let me introduce the United States. So the first, standardized testing and the promotion of STEM education. Interdisciplinary integration, the STEM education policy in the US, emphasizing the integration of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and promotes a shift in curriculum design from subdisciplinary learning to comprehensive project-based learning. This integration not only promotes the cultivation of students' interdisciplinary thinking skills, but also make the curriculum content more relevant to real-world problem solving. So, the curriculum diversity and inclusion. The policy is committed to enhance diversity, equality, and inclusion in STEM education, with a particular focus on the participation of women and disadvantaged groups. This includes providing more learning opportunity and resources for underrepresented groups to narrow the education gap. And the integration of science, education, and industry academic cooperation. The policy encourages work-based learning, connects students with employers and researchers, and strengthens industry academia cooperation. This mode of cooperation helps students gain practical work experience and also provide practical example of course content that match industry needs. So, technology enables STEM education. U.S. policy emphasizing the use of information technology in STEM education to enhance the digital skills of teachers and students. This includes training in the application of data science and advanced networking factories, as well as integrating computer science and computational thinking into K-12 classroom. So let's take a look at the video to see how STEM integration of education and industry academic cooperation is impact students.
For School Day at the K, excited to bring you all the coverage throughout the morning to get you ready for that. We're going to be talking about STEM careers quite a bit. There's a lot of places in Kansas City that have to have smart people working there. Of course, KSHB 41 at the top of the list. I'm kidding. Places like Black and Veatch, Garmin, that kind of thing, where people really have to know what they're doing in those STEM careers that are based here in Kansas City. But the KC STEM Alliance tries to bridge the gap between STEM education and getting those people to those STEM careers. KSHB 41 reporter Charlie Keegan found out more about their mission.
I'm inside the KC Engineering Zone. It's an area for students to come after school and on Saturdays to work on projects like building robots like this one here behind me. And this space is part of KC STEM Alliance's commitment to creating an equitable opportunity and playing field for STEM education.
Well, what we're hearing from our companies is that their solutions are better when the teams at the companies are diverse.
Since 2011, KC STEM Alliance has helped implement 2 nationally recognized hands-on STEM curriculums in public, private, and homeschool settings in both Kansas and Missouri. First is a program called First Robotics. It challenges students to design, program, and build robots, then compete in regional, national, and international competitions. The second program is Project Lead the Way. It enrolls pre-K through 12 students in special courses for biomed, computer science, engineering, and culminates in an end-of-year showcase.
All of us who are my age have a little bit of education envy. These programs weren't available.
KC STEM Alliance's executive director said her group's goal is to prepare the next generation of problem solvers across all industries.
Some people do go into those silos of science, technology, engineering, and math, but what we really understand is that in order to solve any problem, you name it, you're going to be using a little bit of all of those skill sets.
Outside of building robots, McCabe tells me that cybersecurity is one of the next growing sectors of STEM education. In Kansas City, I'm Charlie Keegan for KSH.
Okay, next part will be my partner Virginia Wu to analyze the impact of strategic policy on curriculum in China.
Well, in China, the impact of strategic policies on curriculum is reflected in integration of national curriculum standards with local curriculum. China mandates adherence to a unified national curriculum framework, which defines subject requirements and learning outcomes. However, regions are encouraged to adapt the national curriculum to local needs, especially in cultural subjects and practical skills. For example, in Guangzhou province, schools incorporate regional history and language into the curriculum, blending national standards with local heritage education to foster cultural awareness among students. So it is very clearly that say differences in curriculum reform between China and the US. The US curriculum reform is largely decentralized, with states and districts having significant control, whereas China follows a centralized model with national set standards. China's policies emphasize collective and standardized outcomes, while the US encouraged personalization and student-centered approaches. Okay, let's move on part 4, impact of strategic policies on management. So first of all, this table clearly shows the policy contrast between China and the United States in education management. So in the United States, it is mainly school autonomy and accountability and the leadership role of principals and management teams. While in China, they have centralized and decentralized management models and leading role of educational management departments and the principal responsibility. So first, in the United States, school autonomy varies by states, allowing principals and local school districts significant authority to manage operations, staff, and budgets. This autonomy is balanced to accountability standards set by policies like the Ever Students Succeed Act. For instance, under ESSA, states implement their accountability systems that may include performance-based evaluations of schools and administrators. For example, in Florida, districts use students' achievement data to assess school performance and make management decisions, while principals have discretion to adapt instructional strategies to meet local goals. The second one is leadership role of principals and management teams. U.S. school principals are seen as instructional leaders who get the school culture, support staff development, and engage with the community. For example, in New York City's Empowerment Schools program, principals have increased responsibility over budgeting, curriculum design, and staffing. These principals collaborate with management teams to set school priorities and provide targeted support based on student performance, aligning management goals with local needs. Well, in China, they have centralized and decentralized management models. China's education system combines centralized control with limited regional autonomy. The Ministry of Education sets the main policies, but local education bureaus implement them, adapting guidelines to fit regional contexts. This approach ensure alignment with national goals while allowing schools to address unique local needs. And leading role of educational management departments and the principal responsibility. In China, local educational management departments oversee schools, setting standards and monitoring compliance. Principals operate under a responsibility system where they are accountable for implementing policies and achieving performance targets. The principal responsibility system means that principals must report to local education authorities on school outcomes, resources, and staff management. They often work closely with government-appointed school committees that guide decision making. Ensure school management reflects both national priorities and local implementation details. So overall, differences in management approaches reflect the country's policy structures. Well, the US emphasized school-based autonomy and accountability. The China combines centralized oversight with selective local adaptation. So let's move on to part 5, conclusion. The strategic policies of China and the United States are deeply intertwined with their respective educational framework, reflecting broader geopolitical dynamics. The U.S. focus on strategic competition has led to a reorientation of these educational policies towards fostering innovation and competitiveness. While China's educational strategies are designed to support its ambitions on the global stage. As these two powers continue to vie for influence, the implications for curriculum and management in education will remain a critical area of analysis. Okay, that's all for our presentation. Thank you.